Survivors. The Night the Titanic Sank. Written by Karen Jenner. What an adventure! Will Tate looked out to sea and grinned. Will and his family were sailing to America on the Titanic. The Titanic is the biggest ship in the world, he told his little sister Lucy. I know, said Lucy. I wish we could go upstairs. I've heard it's like a palace. The passengers. Rich passengers sailed in the ship's first-class section. Poorer passengers stayed in the third-class section below. That night, Will lay in his bunk. He listened to the hum of the ship's engines. Soon we'll have a new life in America, Mother whispered in the darkness. Will smiled sleepily. Suddenly, Will felt a hard thump, and then a scrape against the side of the ship. He nearly fell out of his bunk. Maiden Voyage. The Titanic made its first and only voyage in 1912. It was built to a special design that was supposed to make it unsinkable. Will and his father left their cabin to see what had happened. On the third-class deck, they saw passengers playing football with chunks of ice. No one seemed worried. Will kicked a chunk of ice. Goal! Cheered Father. Then a ship's steward interrupted the game. The ship has hit an iceberg, he said. There is no danger, but everyone should wear a life jacket. Will and his father hurried back to their cabin. Hitting the iceberg. When the Titanic hit the iceberg, water began to flood into the hull at the bottom of the ship. What's this for? Lucy asked as she put on her life jacket. It will help you to float in the water, Will told Lucy. Just in case. Will watched as a bright light shot up into the starry night sky. It burst with a loud bang like a firework. That's an emergency flare, said Father. And there's a lifeboat. The ship must be in trouble. The decks. Third-class passengers on the bottom deck were nearly forgotten by the ship's crew. Third-class deck. The lifeboats are on the top deck, said Father. Hurry, called Mother. The Tates ran through the ship. It was like a huge maze. Water gushed into the hallways. The floor sloped, and Will couldn't walk straight. With one hand, he gripped a wooden railing. With the other hand, he pulled Lucy up the grand staircase. At last, they reached the top deck. The ship is sinking, cried a frightened passenger. But the Titanic is unsinkable, someone said calmly. The Tates hurried towards the lifeboats. They weren't taking chances. Women and children in the lifeboats first, called a ship's officer. I won't leave without you, Tom, said Mother. Go on, Jean, Father said. Take care of the children. Mother kissed him and climbed into the lifeboat with Lucy. Now it was Will's turn. Ladies first. The rule in a disaster was to allow women and children into the lifeboats before men. Get in the lifeboat, Will, called Mother. Come on, Lucy echoed. Will didn't know what to do. Finally, he shook his head. I'm staying on the ship with Father, he said. Will, you must go with your mother and sister, said Father. But it was too late. Will and his father watched as the ship's officer lowered the lifeboat into the sea. Soon, there were only a few lifeboats left. The frightened crowd pushed and shoved to climb into the boats. Will felt Father's hand on his shoulder. Suddenly, Father pushed him through the crowd and into a lifeboat. The boat swayed as a ship's officer lowered it into the sea. Will looked up at the Titanic. Father was waving to him from the deck. Lifeboats. The 20 lifeboats on board were not enough for all the passengers and crew. As Will helped to row the lifeboat away from the Titanic, he watched the great ship sink. It tipped forward with a crash. People clung to the railings. Others jumped from the decks. I've got to save my father, called Will. He wanted to row back to the sinking ship, but the other people in the lifeboat stopped him. It's too dangerous, they cried. Sinking. The front of the Titanic sank first. Nearly 3 hours after it hit the iceberg, the Titanic sank completely under the water. Finally, the Titanic disappeared under the water. Somehow, Will felt sure his father would be safe. Some other lifeboats drifted nearby. Using a rope, they linked up with Will's boat. Suddenly, he heard a familiar voice. Will? Is that you? Mother was helping to row one of the other boats. Carefully, Will climbed into her boat and huddled next to Lucy. Lucy shivered. Will put his arm around her to keep her warm. Where's Father? She asked. I don't know, but I'm sure he's fine, said Will. The cold air made his breath look like foggy streams. The lifeboats drifted for a long time. At last, Will saw a light in the distance. It was a rescue ship. Everyone cheered. Rescue ship. A ship called the Carpathia sailed through dangerous ice to rescue the survivors. It was morning by the time the rescue ship arrived. Will and his mother climbed up the rope ladder. They held on tight as the ladder swung in the breeze. Lucy was too little to climb up the rope ladder. The rescue ship's crew pulled her aboard in a mail sack. They were all cold, tired, and hungry. But the most important thing was finding Father. Look! There he is! Will cried out at last. He pointed to a lifeboat that was being towed towards the rescue ship. Father! Father! called Lucy. Father stumbled on board. He was so cold, his lips were blue. I jumped from the Titanic and climbed into the last lifeboat, he gasped. He fell into Mother's arms. I'm so glad to see you all. 3 days later, The rescue ship arrived in America. Will stood on the deck with his family as the ship docked in New York Harbor. "So many people didn't survive the shipwreck," said Father sadly. "We're very lucky," said Mother. Will and Lucy agreed. There were 2,206 people on board the Titanic, but only 705 survived. The Titanic disaster soon led to better safety at sea. Modern safety at sea. Ships now carry enough lifeboats for everyone on board. Modern technology makes it easier for ships to contact each other and to find exact positions. The International Ice Patrol tracks icebergs from the air. With this information, ships can change course to avoid icebergs. The Titanic is found. In 1985, explorers found the wreck of the Titanic in the Atlantic Ocean. Other explorers use special submarines and robots to take pictures and bring back objects from the shipwreck.